You're with the news here. I'm Seher Sama.
I'm Adhar Khan. We'll take you through our top stories at this moment. We start with the idea of one India, one poll. When the President and the Prime Minister pitched for India's simultaneous elections, regional leaders and satraps raised the banner of assault. They said it's an assault on federalism.
The Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister, the Governor, they have come out backing this reform, the idea of simultaneous elections to the Lok Sabha and the state assemblies. Andhra Pradesh government, which has called for a national debate as well, involving all sections of people.
Now, moving one step ahead, the government suggested that polls to even urban and rural local bodies should be conducted within 1 year of the elections.
This was stated while addressing the Andhra Assembly governor there, ESL Narasimhan, saying that it would give government time to address the issues of governance without any distractions.
My government is in full agreement with the elections to both the state assemblies and Lok Sabha to be held simultaneously, so that governments of the state and the centre could pay their undivided attention to the issue of policy and governance during the tenures. My government will also go a step further and suggest that elections to the urban and rural local bodies also should be held within 1 year of the elections to the state and central legislative houses. This will give the governments a full 4 years of undistracted time to address issues of governance. In this regard, in order to take a considered view, it is desirable to have a national debate involving all sections of people.
The government and the opposition parties must get together and try and see if a system can be evolved in which assemblies don't get dissolved, as it happened in the past. Now, how do you evolve that system? Because there is no guarantee that in future, especially in the smaller states where assemblies are smaller, we do have at times, hung assemblies or minority governments, in which cases you will have over time some state governments going off the Lok Sabha record. Sometimes it can even happen with the Lok Sabha. You don't have to, maybe for the next 4 or 5 years we have a stable government. Maybe in 2019 we don't have a stable government. I'm saying this is always there. So until unless you also think of the long-term solution, I think that will be the best if government does that.
Rajesh Kalappa, the Congress party, joins us. Also with us, Saurav Sanyal from the newsroom. Rajesh, first to you. Now, this is an idea that has been mooted time and again, most recently by the Prime Minister. He, of course, is a big component of what he says is electoral reform, is one election, one simultaneous election for states and assembly. We've spoken about this before. You, of course, question the feasibility, perhaps even the timing.
The first thing is, Athar, that, uniform elections were actually conducted when the parliament came into force.
We know the history, but it is discontinued because one government was cut short and then they had to restructure the whole cycle. We know the history, Rajesh, but what about the timing now? Do you think it's a good idea, a viable idea in 2017 India?
Academic idea, because which government is going to say, okay, I forfeit the rest of my term to have elections just now? Let's assume there has been election tomorrow. On the 11th of March, they're going to have 5 states which are going to, the elections will be declared. Right. Then subsequently, maybe on the 20th of March, supposing Mr. Modi says we're going to have uniform elections, are these 5 states going to have elections yet again?
Okay. So you're saying that this continues to remain theoretical, it's impractical on ground, but why do you think the Andhra Pradesh government as well as the governor has spoken out in support of it then?
No, governors are bound to speak in tandem with what Mr. Modi has said. But why Andhra Pradesh government says is because they have had elections around the same time. So it doesn't make the slightest difference to them.
Okay. Well, stay on with us. Getting in further inputs here from our news editor, Saurav Sanyal, with those details there. Saurav, as far as the timing goes, is what the Congress is pointing out here as well. Perhaps those state governments will speak out who are not really asked to cut short their term immaturely.
Well, we heard what Mr. Kalappa had to say, Seher, in this particular, in this context, where he's trying to give this, he's going to try and see this in a different prism altogether. But remember that Prime Minister Modi had mooted the idea of one India, one poll, and that was long back. And subsequently that found an echo in what President Pranab Mukherjee also had said to the country. And he also said that in principle he supports the idea of one India, one poll. So clearly, keeping in mind multiple issues that are intertwined with the electoral process in India, be it the issue of governance, be it the issue of the cost, the huge cost burden that comes down on the exchequer whenever we talk of polls and the entire polling process, possibly keeping everything in mind together, that is what the Prime Minister had in mind when he suggested that India should have this overriding one India, one poll concept. And subsequently, as Pranab Mukherjee said, and now the Andhra Pradesh governor also making a strong pitch for One India, One Poll. Now, while Mr. Kalappa is trying to say that the government at the center, so that is why possibly they're speaking in Prime Minister Modi's language, it definitely has got a political color, is what the Congress is trying to allege. But if you look at the facts, Seher and Athar, you will see that, what are the underlying issues that are intertwined with it, and what can be addressed if India indeed comes together, if there is indeed a national debate, as the Andhra Pradesh governor is saying, and then this idea of One India, One Poll can be adopted in principle.
Brajesh Kalappa, one of the former election commissioners of the country, S.Y. Qureshi, called it a desirable idea, but perhaps not a feasible one. Now, I know the counter-arguments to having one poll simultaneously and the arguments as well. There are counter-arguments to be made, of course, that perhaps the price burden, we're looking at the wrong way. We can, of course, discuss that, and I'll discuss that with you as well. We're joined by the BJP spokesperson right now, Ejaz Ilmi, with us right now. Mr. Ilmi, yet another push, at least the floating of the idea of a simultaneous poll for India. It has its merits, some demerits, some would argue as well. But currently, do you think it's a feasible idea, and you should start getting political parties on board, because without consensus, you can't really execute this?
No, it's a feasible idea, no doubt, and it needs to be debated thoroughly. And the various political parties in Parliament will discuss this and debate this. I see many more merits in it than demerits in terms of holding elections together and the kind of money that is saved.
Right, but Ejaz, many have been saying the merits to this are only theoretically, largely, not really practical, cannot be practiced actually.
The fact is that any good idea needs the right time to be implemented but in a country like...
So is this the right time, Ejaz? I mean, if you look at the political end of it, your political rivals are saying this is an assault on federalism.
No, something like this, it's an idea, needs to be discussed. It can't be imposed by any on top. It's not an executive decision. We are a democracy. It needs to be debated in Parliament. People have to come on board. And the merits and the demerits will have to be discussed. The pros and cons will have to be discussed. If the Prime Minister of India is giving an idea which has a lot of merits, then let the parliamentarians who decide on the law get together, discuss it, and let's have a frank discussion on it.
That's very similar, of course, to what the Congress is maintaining here, interestingly, Ejaz, as well. Brajesh Kalappa, thanks for holding the line, thanks for staying on. If you heard that point, it is a question of really discussing it through and then reaching upon this consensus.
No, I don't see the point of discussing something which is a totally academic exercise. For the first point, I think if the BJP and the Prime Minister were to then dissolve their own assemblies and parliament and then go to elections along with the next forthcoming election, it's a different matter. But it appears as if the BJP doesn't want to make any sacrifice on its part, but expects everybody else to make a sacrifice for it because they want to have uniform elections. This is the point of absurdity.
No,
if
in
they are going
principle,
to,
are you opposed in principle to simultaneous polls? You mentioned yourself that we've had them before. Unfortunately, some governments were, by the use of the president's rule, were terminated, and that's why we're in this situation in the first place, Mr. Kalappa.
No, that's right, but it began. But you can't turn back the wheel. The wheel has turned, and much water has flown under the bridge. At this point in time, to even move this idea is expecting one or the other state to
and you're clear that the idea mooted by the Prime Minister has political overtones and motives. Is that as far as you're willing to go?
See, why was the idea in the first place mooted? It was mooted because the Prime Minister realizes that he has no support in the Rajya Sabha. The only way he can have support in the Rajya Sabha is by winning the states. And the states, people have lost, he's lost his charm. The states are not going by his victory of 2014. People are now asking hard questions. So that is the reason he keeps raising this issue. That look, if we had all the states in 2014, then I would have had the Rajya Sabha along with me. But you have 321 MPs in Lok Sabha. Do something with that majority. But he has not done a single thing with that
Ejaz,
majority.
would you like to respond to that, Ejaz?
No, I understand where my dear friend Mr. Brajesh Kalappa is coming from. Even he's not saying that this idea doesn't deserve a discussion or we can't discuss the merits of this. It is understandable that there will be, if this idea has to go forward, there will be situations where some tenure or assemblies will be curtailed. But it's not going to happen just because the Prime Minister or anybody says so. If it's going to happen, it needs a change in the law, and that can only happen within the Parliament once we debate and discuss this. I mean, we should not shy away from discussing and debating issues in a frank and free manner. If the Prime Minister is putting forward an idea, we should look at it. And if the parliamentarians are convinced that it is a good idea, they can go ahead. And that is exactly where it should be headed.
Well, stay on with us, please. Getting a word here from constitutional expert Mr. Sabha Kashyap with us over the phone line as well. Thanks for being with us, sir. Do you feel this is an idea, the time being right for this, or do you think this is largely a political push there by the current central BJP government?
Well, I can say that I have been expressing this idea for some decades now, and I strongly support elections at the same time for panchayats to parliament. It is not it is not to be seen as a political move, but should be seen from systemic angle. And there are so many arguments in favor of simultaneous elections.
Right, and we are aware, Mr. Kashyap, that this is an idea which was not started by the Prime Minister. It's been around for decades, like you mentioned. Even there has been some talk before. The Congress party seemed interested when they were in power, but they, of course, kind of non-committally eased out of it. The point here is that the overarching pros, if you will, of having simultaneous elections, do they outweigh the cons? If that's the case, then political consensus should be what the government should be working towards, not just a debate.
Well, the question is whether political parties will agree to it, because each political party looks at it from its own vested interests in the status quo. That is the difficulty. The Constitution Commission, Venkatchalaya Commission, of which also I was a part of the drafting committee and member, that had also recommended simultaneous elections.
Right.
But in the commission we said that it should not be done with a hammer at the same time.
Okay.
But it should be a
something cannot, of course, cannot be forced through, largely requires discussion. Let's get in a word here, reaction from the BJP, Dr. Subramanian Swamy with us on the phone line as well. Dr. Swamy, the Congress, of course, essentially accusing the BJP to be using this politically instead of really looking at a real reform here.
No, it's not a question at all. I mean, we need 5 years of freedom from elections. Otherwise, how can you plan? Every time there's an election, everything is taken as a national mandate or a national test. So this really disrupts governance. But the question is, while we are all in support of one date for one election, for all elections, the fact is, what happens if a government, a coalition government collapses? And there's no alternative government that can be formed.
Okay.
There's no provision in the Constitution for not having an election within 6 months. So you'll need a constitutional amendment on that.
Well, Dr. Swamy, what about the charge, especially coming in from the east of India, that this is an assault on federalism, trying to force this down our throat when you're not ready, the time is not feasible, etc., etc.?
No, I think March is a very feasible time for the whole of India. There's no part of India which cannot go to elections in March.
But
March, April.
Right, Dr. Swamy, the argument here also being that there would be several state governments which will have to cut short their term to synchronize with this one single date, and that possibly cannot happen. You cannot really have several state governments make that sacrifice.
Well, you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, as they say. One was a one-time sacrifice, and it can be done by mutual accommodation and by mutual discussion. We need not do it right away.
But it's a good idea, and political consensus should be the aim here, because it's a bipartisan idea. It would really help.
There are constitutional issues. If a government falls during the middle of the term,
right,
and nobody else can form a government in the available...
Absolutely. Requiring constitutional amendment is what we're seeing as well. Dr. Swamy, appreciate speaking to us. Mr. Sabha Kashyap, constitutional expert on that note as well.